Mead, the drink of the gods, the favored wine of our forefathers. It is many things, but chief among them, delicious. Every drinking horn in the halls of Valhalla has at one point been filled with this golden, inebriating nectar. You simply cannot have a Viking feast without plenty of mead. And seeing as how we're going to do plenty of feasting in the next few weeks, you may as well get prepared. But as you soon shall see, making mead is actually incredibly easy and simple to do, and you can do it with stuff that you might just have laying around in your pantry. It also doesn't take like half a year for you to make mead that tastes good either. The mead that we'll be making today we shall drink together in less than a week. There shall be tales of high romance, giant eagles, and Viking rap battles coming up. So stick around and help me make some mead for the feast. Now, for those of you out there who might only have an inkling of what mead actually is, let me explain. Mead is essentially a honey wine. It can be a sweet treat with about the alcohol content of your average beer, or a jet fuel tasting dry drink that is more than double the alcohol content of your average wine. It can be served still or carbonated, warm or cold, but today we're going to be making a middle-of-the-line mead that is it'll be about 8% alcohol content. It's not exact, but it'll taste good, trust me. And if you make it and you decide you don't like it, then making alterations is one of the easiest things in the world. You see, mead is one of the most customizable and customized drinks in human history. You see, the Vikings were not the first to discover this drink. No. As far back as 7000 BC in China, we've discovered pottery that has chemical signatures consistent with the fermentation of honey. The ancient Greeks called mead ambrosia, or nectar, and believed it was a drink of the gods. They believed that it descended from the heavens as dew, and that the bees went out in the morning and gathered it up. See, I bet you thought I misspoke when I said this was the wine of our forefathers. Well, nearly every culture on the face of the earth has at some point decided to use honey to make sweet, sweet wine. And as you'll see, it's not hard to see why. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Now, you're going to need 1 gallon of spring water. Vikings didn't really write down their recipes, or much of anything for that matter, but an ancient Roman recipe in the De Re Rustica, written by Lucius Junius Moderatus Comella, born in 4, actually says to use leftover rainwater or spring water that's been boiled to purify it. So I think we've gotten pretty close there. We're following tradition pretty well so far. Next, you're going to need at least a 32-ounce container of your favorite honey. Now, I got an 80-ounce container of honey, which is a whole honkin'-ass 5 pounds of honey, which we can use to make well over 2 gallons of mead if we so choose, but you only need a relatively sizable container of honey. Now, for the yeast, I'm using simple bread yeast, just because it works just fine for the level of alcohol we're trying to get, and I don't have to wait for a fancy yeast to come in the mail. You can buy fancy yeasts online, but for today, bread yeast will do us just fine. And finally, you're going to need some raisins. You can use like 2 or 3, or you can use like 6. It's a minuscule quantity of raisins either way. So you can probably just buy one of those 99-cent little teeny boxes of raisins. But I mean, we like to make oatmeal cookies around here, so we've got a veritable vat of raisins. We'll never run out. Now, for equipment, you're going to need either a sizable, clean mason jar with a accompanying lid, or a balloon, or both. I know those seem like completely unrelated items out of context, but trust me, you're going to need one or the other. It's going to depend on whether or not you're going to want to make a large batch or a small batch. The smaller batches will be made in the mason jar. That's what we're going to be making on the show today. That's what I'm going to show you. I'll leave instructions in the description on how to make a big old batch in the gallon jug if you want it. Now, actually making the mead is just about as complicated as the ingredient list, which is to say, not very. First, you're going to put your honey into the mead jar. You're going to fill it up to about a fifth to a quarter of the jar. Let me see here. If you look at a mason jar, you probably can't see this. It's kind of hard to see in real life, actually. But you have, a lot of mason jars will have measurements on the side. And you can put probably about a cup, I think, is what we filled it to for the thing. Maybe a cup and a half if you're looking for like really sweet. But you're going to end up getting a little bit sticky that way. Now, next you're going to want to add the water to your mason jar. You're going to want to leave an inch or two on the top just to leave enough room for gas to build up. And so when you degas it later, it doesn't just immediately start spraying everywhere, which we'll talk about more later. Next, you're going to want to take all that honey and water, screw the top on, and give it a good shake. Shake it with gusto, man. You gotta work those glutes. You gotta really mix up that honey and water. You want it completely mixed together. Next, you're gonna want to put your yeast and your raisins in the container, and then just give it a little shake, just a little gusto, and then just done. Your friendly little yeast boys should wake up in the water and breakfast on those raisins you put in there, and then they'll get busy making your alcohol for you. Now, make sure the lid is closed securely, but then loosen it just a little bit. You don't want it cranked down all the way. You want to loosen it just a bit, because otherwise it's going to explode. It'll be sticky mess, Viking sticky hand grenade. Don't do that. Loosen it a bit. If you're afraid, loosen it too much. It's really not going to hurt. Essentially what happens, why this happens, you might be wondering, is as part of the process of making the alcohol, the yeast is going to create carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide is going to have nowhere to go if you've really cranked it down. So when it expands, either the metal top is going to pop off or the glass is going to shatter. You don't want either of those things. You want it to put a little bit of pressure on there if you want it to be sparkling, because then the carbon dioxide gets pushed down into the water, the liquid, and that's carbon dioxide carbonated. Now next you're going to want to just cover the mason jar, put it in a box maybe, but after a couple of days you're going to want to pop the top off just to make sure that you didn't close it too tight. I would do this like over the sink maybe, if you're afraid that you did shut it a bit tight. Now, primary fermentation is going to take 3 to 5 days, and that's going to produce 70% of the potential alcohol of your batch. So right after that 5-day mark, 4 or 5 days, is when you're going to want to pop it open and just start giving it a whiff, give it a little taste, give it a little tasty taste. If it tastes good, time to drink it. Like there really is no stage of this fermentation that anyone's going to shame you for starting to drink it. It's just, obviously it's going to get more alcoholic the longer you keep it in there. But after 3 to 5 days, it should be around the 8% marker that we're shooting for. It'll be a little bit citrusy, a little bit sweet. If you want it to be more citrusy, less sweet, leave it in there longer. If you want it to be sweeter, take it out earlier. And if you let it go too long, or you didn't let it go long enough, no big deal. It's just one mason jar full of mead. But now that batch of mead is going to obviously going to take a while. So, we've got a lot of time to kill, my friend. So I think it might be time for us to explore the Viking legend behind the origin of mead. Now, like any good story, it ends with a beginning and begins with an end. In this case, it is the end to a war between the gods. To signify the end of hostilities, the gods came together around a great bowl and took turns spitting into it. Once they were done with this act of communal expectoration, the spit in the bowl came together and gave birth to Kvasir, the world's wisest man. The only thing to expect, really, when you just go around spitting into each other's bowls. Now, Kvasir, after, I assume, screaming "why" into the heavens, went about proving the depth of his wisdom. But a pair of dwarves grew jealous of Kvasir's intellect. and devised a way to take it for themselves. They slew Kvasir, and taking his blood, they mixed it with honey. The resulting elixir became known as the Mead of Poetry. Any who drank this mead would be imbued with a spark of Kvasir's wisdom and become inspired to the greatest heights of artistry and intellect. Eventually, the greedy and murderous dwarves had the mead taken from them by a giant named Suttungr, who put it under the guard of his daughter, Gunnlod. Now, something you have to realize about the giants is that they're constantly at odds with the gods of Asgard, chief among them being Odin himself. So when Odin learned that Suttungr had the mead of poetry, Odin knew right away that he had to steal it for himself, because you can't let the giants have anything cool. You gotta take it. So Odin set into action his Ocean's 11 style bank heist for the mead of poetry. He wooed Gunnlod, and then when her guard was down, Odin turned into a great eagle, drank up all the mead, and flew off with it all to Valhalla. A plan so crazy, it just worked. Suttungr, like any good father, chases Odin across Midgard, which is Earth, as Odin tries to flee to Asgard. Odin makes it just in time, but while he was being chased, some of the mead of poetry spilled out onto the earth. And those who drank of the mead of poetry that fell down upon the earth became great poets and scholars. And mead, as we know it today, is simply an imitation of the original mead of poetry that fell down from the heavens. A lot of the origins of mead seem to involve a descent from heaven, but I think the Vikings win the most colorful imagery contest for how it got here. I mean, you got the picture of the eagle right here. There's Odin who's got a little beard on it. And there's the mead getting put into Asgard, and here's the mead falling into the earth. See, it's coming right out of. Well, I think that's enough of that. Time to check on the mead. See if it tastes good. I let this go for about 7 days because I wanted mine a little bit more on the tart side. So I'm gonna go ahead and bottle it. If you want to get fancy with it, it will continue fermenting. Even when you bottle it, it'll slow way down if you put it in the fridge, but it will still ferment. It'll slowly expand in there, so you might want to not put too much in there. You could also try freezing it, which will kill fermentation entirely if you freeze it for long enough. And in order to do that, you're obviously going to want to not put it in a container where, when it's going to expand, it's going to explode. Because, we've made it this far without an explosion. It'd be a shame to change that. So the only thing left to do is to give it a taste. So it's got the jar right here. Ooh, it actually, just in the time that it took for us to talk about this, it got a little fizz to it. It gave me a little bit of a... all right. Pour it into a mead horn here. Oh, yeah. Yes, looks good. All right. Smells really nice. Kind of smells like... A lot of recipes say to put oranges in there. It actually kind of smells a little bit like oranges. Oh, that's good. You can definitely taste the honey still. It's got a lot of kind of citrusy undertones to it. It's very, it's a little bit tart. You can tell it's alcoholic, but it doesn't taste like alcohol. It actually just kind of burns a little bit going down. So this get you drunk, but it's not. It doesn't taste like it would get you drunk right away. I think I'm already getting drunk. I'm tripling over my words. Oh my God. It tastes pretty good on its own like this, but this is also a really good drink to mix things with. So what I normally do is I will get a, this is essentially a carbonated juice, fruit juice. This is apple here. Ooh. But yeah, I think I'd call that a success. That's really, really good. Next week we're going to be drinking this with some delicious food that we will make for the show. If you liked the video, obviously like it. That's what the like button's for. If you want to see more like this every once in a while, hit the subscribe button. And if you want to see us every week, hit the subscribe button and then hit that little bell next to the subscribe button, that little thing. Didgeridoo, just give it a smack. Until then, I'll see you next time for the feast. Skål.